In Surat, the whole town laid out the red carpet for Prabhupada. People would string saris across the buildings, from building to shade the pathway when we would do Sankirtan. Everyone would hang out the windows and throw flowers and rice. And people would come up to us by the hundreds and giving us garlands, and they would pile up, so you'd have to start taking them off because there would be so many. And Prabhupada for hours tirelessly would see hundreds of people, and he'd pass out these little candies to them. Surat was really, really magical. Prabhupada used to speak tirelessly. We would go to various programs. Prabhupada, by that time, had known that because we talked a lot, he knew that I had memorized the Isopanishad and was able to sing it because I'd sung it for him before. So we went to this village outside of Surat once, and he asked me to sing the Isopanishad. So I stood up and I sang. I was very nervous. I mean, I was only at the time I was only 18 by that time. So I'm singing this, all the verses. I've memorized all of them and I'm singing them. And Prabhupada was always treating us like his children. So when I finished, he was beaming like a proud father. And he called me over and put my head in his lap. And he patted my back and rubbed my head. And he said he was so proud. And I mean, it was like one of those magical moments where I'll never forget it, because he was very warm, very affectionate.
The first meeting we had with the whole group of members of Dinapan, the top chairman down, they all came and very formally they presented their cards to Prabhupada. I think this story is told in the Leelamrita. They all presented their cards and then they left, and Prabhupada was left with one, the number 7 man to just show us off at the end. It was like a whole ceremony. It was like a tea ceremony, but we drank water. They drank tea. They were on one side of the big oak desk and we were on the other. So Prabhupada had a word with the man before we went to the limousine, and he asked the man, what is, your goal? And of course Prabhupada had been given these calling cards by each of them. My name is so-and-so. My name is so-and-so. So that man took all the cards and put them in a row, up and down, and he was number 7. When Prabhupada asked him what his goal in life was, he took the card number 7 and he went like this. And Prabhupada shook his head and laughed, and then he really, started to preach to this man about the nature of life and how temporary it was, and that was not the purpose of life. So Prabhupada was a real transcendental negotiator. He had me be the heavy man, and Dinapan would give a price and I would say it's impossible, and I'd give this ridiculously low price, and they would just practically start crying. It was so ridiculous, the price. And that we would get into a big argument, and Prabhupada would just sit there in a neutral position, and finally he would act as if he was the arbitrator. And he'd say, this is not good, this should not be quarreling like this. He said, I will settle it. He said, neither side should argue like this. We must consider both the needs of each side. And he would pick the price that he wanted, which was still extremely low, but by that time they would just think that, Prabhupada was their savior. And in this way we went through all of the prices of each book, and Prabhupada got very low contract prices. And he was very proud that he had been able to get $60,000 worth of business with $5,000 down payment. He said, they have so much trust and faith in my writing.
So then that night, all the people from the Gita Press showed up for this program. And it was supposed to be a lecture on Vedanta Sutra. A very philosophical topic, right? The one that starts out Janmad Yasya Yato Nwayad or Yataha, and then it becomes the first line in the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's very philosophical. So Prabhupada was speaking about Vedanta Sutra, but very quickly he brought it around to the conclusion that the ultimate knowledge of Vedanta was knowledge of Radha and Krishna, right? And then he quoted the line, the one about Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. And when he was talking about Kunja Bihari, right, which means that they're enjoying in the pleasure groves of Vrindavan, as he talked about Kunja Bihari, He'd been speaking for maybe 15 minutes. His eyes closed, and he was sitting up very straight. And he just stopped talking and was sitting up very straight with a little tremble was going in his body. And he just sat there for I don't know how many minutes. He just sat quietly for several minutes. And both the Gita Press people, who are actually nice Indian devotees, and ourselves were just spellbound watching him, because we knew that he drifted off into a trance right on the Vyasa-san. Sometimes in those days when we were traveling, Prabhupada would be tired, and he would literally doze off while sitting in his seat or waiting on the Vyasa-san or something like that. But this time he was sitting up very straight, and there was a little tremor I could see in his body. And after several minutes, while we just sat, you could hear a pin drop in the room. Nobody said anything, nobody moved, everybody just was watching him. After a few minutes, he opened his eyes, and he said, "So this song is very nice. You should all learn to sing this song." And he got up off the Vyasa-san and went into his room, and that was the end of the lecture.
In London, of course, that was another interesting negotiation. Prabhupada told us, I got to London in September of 1969, and by that time Prabhupada was getting ready to get the place in Bury Place, 7 Bury Place. And what is a temple without deities? So Prabhupada gave us the instruction that you have to install Radha Krishna deities. But he didn't order the deities, and we didn't have any deities. He just said, such and such, December so-and-so was the date of the opening, and you have to have Radha Krishna deities. So we, started to go. It was like trying to find a needle in a haystack. How are you supposed to find Radha and Krishna in London? We just started to ask anyone and everyone. It was like a national alarm. Anyone knowing the whereabouts of Radha and Krishna, please phone such and such number. And that was the number of Mukunda's wife, Janaki. So, it went, week after week went by, and Prabhupada would call us and say, "Where are the deities?" And we said, we don't know where Radha and Krishna are. Prabhupada said, "You have to have deities." So finally, miraculously, when we were practically giving up, we get this phone call. Janaki gets a phone call. Someone says, "We have Radha Krishna deities." So immediately she informed Mukunda, and Mukunda and I went down to this man's house. And the man took us into his study, and he said, "I have some Radha Krishna marble deities. Would you like to look at them?" So, would we like to look at them? We were ready to jump out of our skins practically. Sure, we wanted to look at them. And he took off the cloth, and, we just offered our obeisances, because that was Radha Londoneshvara. So we said, "They're beautiful. They're so beautiful." I mean, they were beautiful. And he said, "Well, I'm considering that I may be willing to give them to your temple." So we said, "Well, we have to, can we bring our spiritual master to see them?" And he said, "Yes, you can do so." So we raced out, and we went to a phone booth. I remember we called immediately to Prabhupada's apartment. Prabhupada was living near Regent's Park, a very nice apartment. And we called up, and he was resting, so we decided just to go over there. We went in there, we told him, "Prabhupada, we found Radha and Krishna." So Prabhupada immediately said, "Take me, I want to see them." So we had a van. We used to have a van. And it was Prabhupada and Mukunda, Shamsundar, and myself, maybe Gurudas, came in the van, and we went in. And by that time was the early evening. Prabhupada came in, and he started to talk with this Indian gentleman, very friendly way. The man said that these deities were ordered already for society, but somehow or other things had not worked out. There was some difficulty, and they could not use the deity. So Prabhupada would just ignore the point, and he just kept asking the man, "Where are you from? How are you? How's your wife?" He made the man bring his wife in, bring the children in. Prabhupada, gave his blessings to everyone, just talking. And finally the man, said, "Swamiji, don't you want to see the deities?" And Prabhupada said, "Oh, yes, we can see the deities." It was just so nonchalant, as if he was not even interested. So, he said, "Please, I want to show them to you." So he took the man took Prabhupada over, and he showed him the deities. And Prabhupada looked and said, and he just turned around and walked and sat back on his sofa. So the man said, wow, Swamiji, I mean, what do you think? Can you use a deity? Prabhupada said, yeah, they looked like they may be used. He said, well, I'm thinking I can give them to you. Prabhupada said, yes, we could accept them. And he said, he asked me, go and see how heavy the deity is.